introduce our wonderful panel. Well, since you are on stage already, let me reintroduce you. Please help me welcome back Thierry Frémaux, director of the Institut Lumière of the Lumière Film Festival, director of the Cannes Film Festival, as I said before. He grew up near Lyon, where his dad, who ran a film club, introduced him to cinema. He joined the Institut Lumière in Lyon in 1982 and worked as a movie programmer alongside Bertrand Tavernier. He became artistic director, then general manager in 1999, and then created the Lumière Film Festival in 2009 with the aim of promoting heritage films. All right. Jan Christopher Horak is the director of UCLA Film and Television Archive and professor of critical studies. Previously, he was director of archives and collections at Universal Studios, director of the Munich Film Museum, and senior curator of George Eastman House. Author of more than 300 articles on film, he is co-editor of LA Rebellion, Creating a New Black Cinema, which won the SCMS Best Edited Collection Award and the Andor Krasna Kraus International Film Book Award. He was the founding vice president as well as president of the Moving Image Archivists and has served on the executive committee of the Fédération Internationale des Archives du Film. How did I do? All right, welcome. All right, sorry, we changed the order, so here we go. Grover Crisp currently manages all facets of restoration and digital archiving and remastering for Sony Pictures, including the Columbia and TriStar film and television libraries. He has directed the Sony Pictures Film Preservation Committee from its inception in 1900, whose members include the UCLA Film and Television Archives, the Museum of Modern Art, George Eastman House, the Library of Congress, and the Academy Film Archive of AMPAS. Welcome. Sorry. Two-time Golden Globe winning writer and director Alexander Payne studied history and Spanish literature at Stanford before getting an MFA in film production at UCLA. He serves on the boards of the Film Foundation, the Telluride Film Festival, and Film Streams, a not-for-profit cinematheque in Omaha. His features to date are Citizen Ruth, Election, About Schmidt, Sideways, The Descendants, Nebraska, and Downsizing. His films have been nominated for 18 Academy Awards, winning twice for Best Adapted Screenplay. And Miss Jane Fonda, award-winning actress, author, activist, and fitness guru. Over her 50-year career, Jane has done 45 films and worked tirelessly on causes such as women's rights, Native Americans, and the environment. 3-time Golden Globe winner, 2-time Academy Award winner, Palme d'Or honoree, recipient of the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, and most recently the Lumière Award honoree at the Lumière Festival in Lyon. Jane recently celebrated a landmark birthday by raising $1 million for each of her nonprofits, the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential, and the Women's Media Center. Fans can currently watch her Emmy-nominated performance as Grace on Netflix's Grace and Frankie, now in its 4th season. our moderator, Sandra Schulberg, founder and president of IndieCollect. She founded IFP in the late 70s, co-founded First Run Films in 1980, and is a member of the distribution cooperative New Day Films. She currently serves on the advisory committee of the Women's Film Preservation Fund and is a member of the Association of Moving Image Archivists. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much to all of you, first of all, for joining us here, all of you for being in the audience, and a special thanks to the HSPA. You know, many people associate the HSPA quite rightly with the extraordinary Golden Globes, but I want to pay tribute to you all as working journalists who are reporting on cinema and cultural policy in each of your own countries. That's the work that we Americans don't get to see, but is the reason why you're here. I also want to thank especially the HSPA for deciding to make such a significant investment, as you heard from Meher and you heard from Thierry Frémaux, in film restoration. This is really a crisis that is engulfing us, and the fact that you've made such a strong commitment to this is terribly important to me and to all of us. And I especially want to thank Meher Tatna, the leadership of the HSPA, Meher Tatna, Lorenzo Soria, who's here, Luca Chilada, who's really done all the heavy lifting organizing this event, Silvia Bizio, head of the Grants Committee, and Sandra Cuneo, the program officer, among many others. So it's my great pleasure to invite Jane Fonda to address us. Jane, I'm so grateful that you decided to dive into this arena.
Me too.
and Jane has spent the last couple of weeks really researching this topic. And
yeah, full disclosure, I don't know anything about film restoration. I don't know really why I'm up here. I think it's to punish me because my favorite ex-husband colorized a lot of MGM's library. But Sandra has been mentoring me, and I'm extremely grateful that I got put into this position. I mostly wanted to be with Thierry and Alexander. I said, well, any chance that I could be on a panel with them. So I started studying the issue, and I'm so grateful. I'm just overwhelmed by the amount of material that needs to be restored and preserved and the lack of resources to do it. And the first thing I said, I'm going to do a fundraiser for UCLA, and I'm going to do a fundraiser for your IndieCollect. Anything I can do to help raise money to make this all. Your name is Jane Fonda. But Ted was a pariah for colorization when he very briefly owned MGM. I'm going to say something totally politically incorrect, and this is what he said to me on our first date. It was decades before Me Too. He said, I didn't own MGM long enough to even use the casting couch. But I will have to say that since I've started researching the subject, what I discovered to my great joy is that Ted preserved the MGM library. He did. And he did it, and he felt passionately about it. The MGM library, by the way, was what allowed him to create Turner Classic Movies, which is so amazing. See, because I'm not an expert, I have to read what I'm going to say. When Ted bought MGM, he made the late Roger Mayer chief executive of Turner Entertainment. Roger had previously founded MGM Laboratories for Film Preservation, and in his new position for Turner, he was responsible for managing and restoring the library, including Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz. Ted paid for those. Let me give a shout out to Ted. And I want to give a shout out to Roger Mayer, who in 1996 became a founder and chair of the National Film Preservation Foundation, where he is credited with enabling the preservation of 2,000 orphan films, which means films whose original copyright had expired or otherwise, this is an important sentence, lacked commercial potential sufficient to pay for their preservation. I don't know how many of you have read Anthony Slide's 1992 book, Nitrate Won't Wait. Well, you guys are really into movies. I'm very impressed. Well, this book, Nitrate Won't Wait, gives a history of the film preservation movement in the United States. It discusses the dangers of nitrate film and the wholesale junking of film prints during the silent era. It documents the beginning of the archive movement in the 1930s and 40s. Now, you would think that a book like this would be filled with stories of historic efforts to save films, but it isn't. I mean, there have been many heroic efforts, but for cost reasons and the sheer amount of material that need to be saved, what I'm learning is that our resources are woefully inadequate. We're going to hear about magnificent restorations undertaken by Grover Crisp and his team. As you know, Sony used to be MGM, so it's kind of nice to see that they're carrying on a critical mission. Not to mention that they're restoring a few of my family films, Failsafe, Cat Ballou, and Easy Rider. What? Huh? But most other studios are cutting back on their archive staff and turning to the Academy Film Archive, the UCLA Film and Television Archive, to store their masters and to undertake film restorations that they might otherwise have funded themselves in the past. And this puts tremendous pressure on these repositories who are already struggling with a shortage of vault space and archive staff. The challenge of indie filmmakers, as Sandra knows all too well, is far greater. As a rule, they have no resources and no archive contacts. Sandra founded the IndieCollect and is trying to close the gap between the filmmakers and the archives. They've rescued and documented 6,000 film negatives in the past 4 years, placed about 3,000 at participating archives, and restored more than 30. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, there's going to be a photograph up there.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of shots of Bob of the WRS lab. Here we go.
Is this WRS? This is WRS. WRS was a major film lab in Pittsburgh. And it was major despite the fact that it was in Pittsburgh because a lot of major things go on in Pittsburgh, but you see, because it was cheaper than labs in New York or Los Angeles, major studios used WRS a lot. It went bankrupt in 2001. The Academy retrieved the negatives for 8 Otto Preminger films, but there are maybe 10,000 more films that remain in this wreckage that may be lost to us forever. Not only were all the George Romero films processed there, I learned all this from Sandra, thank you very much, but African-American director, wait a minute. African-American director Bill Greaves processed 20 films there. By some miracle, last February, Sandra, her team, found the complete original negative of Greaves' film Nation Time at WRS. the long-lost film that documented the 1972 National Black Political Assembly. It's the only film of that historic event, and she's now applying to the HFPA to restore it. You know, Costa-Gavras, the French director, well, he's Greek, sorry. You're Greek, he's Greek too. Yay, Greek cinema. Anyway, Costa-Gavras recently reminded me that I brought him to that Black National Assembly in 1972. We were the only white people there. So I hope I'm in the film. In 1970, I made a film called FTA, which to GIs meant Fuck the Army. The documentary represented the GI movement, which means active duty soldiers against the Vietnam War. It showed a troupe of multiracial performers, including me, Donald Sutherland, Paul Mooney, and Holly Near, traveling to U.S. military bases in the U.S., Hawaii, the Philippines, Okinawa, and Japan, where we played to a total of 6,000 soldiers, men and women, who are shown in the documentary roaring their approval of our anti-war skits and songs. I can't find the negative. It was owned by American International and released briefly, like maybe one day in 1972. I called Chris Burrell, who I think is out here today. She worked on the film, and to see if she knew where the negative was. And she told me that there was a rumor at the time that American International had bought the film as a personal favor to Richard Nixon so they could catch and kill it. Apparently, the top American International executive was good friends with Nixon. We don't know absolutely if this is true, but the negative disappeared and the film was pulled from the theaters. And Chris and I think that they correctly intuited that releasing FTA would put a lie to Nixon's rhetoric that anyone that was against the war was against the troops, and the troops were all pro-war. The thing may be lost to us forever. Another thing that I did was, this is why I realized how important restoration is. Haskell Wexler went to North Vietnam, yes, in 1973 with me, my son, Troy Garrity, who was 9 months old, and Tom Hayden. The war was still going on, and we made a film called Introduction to the Enemy. Fortunately, the UCLA Film Archives is preserving it. You know, future generations need to know who and what we were bombing. Troy, my now grown son, is working on a documentary about the student movement of the 60s and 70s with his father as a focal point. Much of the archival footage he's using to illustrate historically significant moments were captured by independent political documentary organizations like Third World, Newsreel, and others. Remember them? Their films illustrated an American history that was excluded from network television and often serve as the only filmic counterpoint to the establishment version of events. These films were made because filmmakers wanted to make sure that what happened would never be forgotten. They wanted young people to know that most good things achieved in this country were achieved by struggle, that the contributions of people and that mainstream culture considers other are a rich and invaluable part of the tapestry that makes us who we are. Many, maybe even most of these films take us into areas we're not familiar with or are uncomfortable with. But if we allow these documents of our past to disappear, we end up with a narrow and shallow knowledge of how change happens, how problems can be solved, how to engage people and cultures not like us. We can't know where we're going if we don't know where we've been. Feared, these films lack the commercial potential sufficient to pay for their preservation. Nearly all indie films are at risk today, either because they only exist on celluloid, which means they can't be seen, or because they only exist in subpar video formats like FTA, or because they were made in a digital format and I'm told we haven't yet figured out a secure way to preserve digital motion picture files for the future. I don't know if that's true. I hear this is another thing I have to look into. I hear that there's a bit of a conflict between people who want to preserve everything on film and those who want to preserve it digitally.
Well, we hope Grover is going to solve this problem.
Okay, good.
Who's next?
Only a few lucky films get chosen each year for restoration by the studios, the Film Foundation, the HSPA, Academy Film Archive, UCLA MoMA, Library of Congress, Criterion, and the tiny IndieCollect. Perhaps we ought to invest as much money in saving films as we do in making them. But anyway, if you're an independent filmmaker, please educate yourself about how to save and protect your film for the future. Don't wait as long as I did. Thank you.
Looks like we have a new champion on our side. Thank you, champion. That was a very eloquent testimonial on behalf of all of us who are struggling with this issue. So I'm so happy to have you join the campaign. And Jane, has a reputation for being incorruptible. So I swear no money changed hands between us. This was her own initiative. Thank you again. Now, Grover Crisp is one of the people that we, in the archive world and the world of those who are passionate and concerned about film preservation and restoration, look up to mightily. And he is famous for having restored so many important movies, including The Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, which some of you, I hope, got to see, many, many, many others, and I'm proud to say, On the Waterfront, written by my uncle Bud Schulberg, and now Easy Rider, which is in progress. And I think you're going to explain, among other things, that actually you're doing Easy Rider for is it the third time, Grover?
Yes.
Explain what that process is like.
Of course, working at a studio, studios love things like anniversaries. So we did a 30th anniversary restoration, which was all photochemical at the time. We made a lot of great new prints. We worked with the wonderful Laszlo Kovacs, cinematographer, on that project. And about 10 years ago, we did another restoration as a digital restoration, but not kind of the work that we do today. And for this year, for the 50th anniversary, which was something that was really promoted to the studio by Peter Fonda and helped us get that going. We're doing a full 4K restoration right now, working with the best film elements that survive. All of the negative does not survive on that film. And
did you say all the negative does not survive?
No.
They were too stoned.
It's one of the challenges.
I was wondering, can we explain some of the others that are missing? Anyway, so we hope to premiere that someplace very soon. So
in the south of France.
In the south of France. Well, I didn't want to step on your line. So, shall we get into?
Yes, please go on and talk about the other.
So, I have a few things to show that basically exhibit some of the challenges that we have. So, if you can put up the slide show in the booth, and oh well, there's my fancy first slide that I created myself. So, Ride Lonesome is a Western from 1959. It's directed by Bud Bedecker. It stars Randolph Scott and is a terrific Western. It definitely has a cult status along with his other films. We'll see if this works. Okay, there is a frame from the film. Problem The main problem with this film is that it is very faded. When Eastman Color negative came in and replaced 3-strip Technicolor as the primary color capture for motion pictures, Eastman Color negative is a very good negative as long as it's handled and stored and cared for properly. The problem is that that was not the case for many films in the 50s and 60s primarily. And if it's not stored at a proper temperature and humidity, it will fade like this. When we started working on this about 20 years ago, we could not make prints off of this negative with justifiable color because of the degree that it's faded. We just finished a brand new 4K restoration of this film, scanning this faded negative, and managed to create a color palette that looks like this. So this is one of the benefits that we have doing work digitally nowadays, is that we can hopefully bring things back a little bit better than we could in a more limited way in the photochemical era. Here's another frame that's similar. And these next 4 frames are kind of interesting because they are faded, but they are also, it exhibits a film tear, which you'll see right there, there, there. These four frames are consecutive, so they exhibit fading plus there's a tear. The reason it's diagonal is because it goes across the frames this way. So the way that we fix tears like that is we take a frame like this one that is not torn, and we merge in the picture from the previous frame that is not torn to this one to replace that. And there's some manipulation in graphics suite as well that allows us to do that. And then here are the 4 frames in a row that are restored. So this frame is also very faded, but also has a tear running right down the middle of it, along with a number of other things going on. One thing that I wanted to mention that makes it difficult is that this film is faded, but not to the same degree across the whole field here. It's actually worse over here than it is over there. So again, with digital technologies and working with a great colorist at Roundabout named Sherry Eisenberg, we're able to not only make that repair, but also get the color back so that it's even across the frame. Okay, so we can, now I want to, before we start the next clip, and you can take this down if you like, there is a film that we restored a few years ago. It's Richard III, adaptation of Richard III, directed by Laurence Olivier. It's 1955, color, faded, but also chopped up, and we had a lot of trouble working on it. It took a couple of years to replace over 100 shots out of an only 500 shot film because the film had been cut. This is a restoration that I had the great fortune to work on. It was a collaboration with the Film Foundation. It's a project of theirs with funding by the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. So I want to explain why we're going to run this. Up on the screen, you'll see on the right side a restored version, and on the left side is the raw scan of the negative. So the goal here is to get the color through this whole sequence consistent, which will be on the right. Over here, this next shot is from a duplicate negative that is much more faded than the shot before it. And throughout this sequence, which doesn't run very long, there are also shots that are cut in that were shot in a studio back in London. So this is in Spain, shot on location. And this exhibits in some ways, how film was handled, processed, stored from different parts of the world. all coming together later. There are other duplicate negatives cut into this. You'll see a little bit later, but let's see where this goes for the next shot. And here we're back to original negative, not quite as faded as those duplicates. And you'll see on the left that it goes back and forth in terms of the type of negative that we had to work with to put this film back together and the challenges we had. Here is a studio shot in London. It's cut in, not so faded because it looks pretty good compared to the final color version over here on the right. So what I really wanted to do with this was just to exhibit the challenges that we have in different types of material, different degrees of fading, and what we can do to make it seem seamless in terms of the consecutive shots and the color that you have in a sequence like this. And yeah, if you don't know to play, the key doesn't do too well here. Okay, we'll let this run. And this next film is not a color faded film, but I did want to show it because what you're seeing now is a 1996 restoration, and this is the current 4K restoration. And the reason I wanted to show this is because in the photochemical process, working with this 3-strip negative for A Matter of Life and Death, which is a Michael Powell and Pressburger film, we were limited in the kind of color we could get from secondary elements that we worked with back then versus what you're seeing right now, which is a 4K scan directly off the 3 separate black and white negatives for the film. And so this is just a little technical thing that I wanted to show because we're quite proud of this. Very happy to have Thelma Schoonmaker, who was married to Michael Powell, work with us on this and get it to where it should look finally. Okay, you can cut that off.
You know, most people have never, most filmmakers and no audiences have ever seen a negative. And what Grover just demonstrated is what a negative actually looks like when you're able to scan the negative itself and convert that into a digital image, in this case a 4K version. So I think it's very dramatic and it's extraordinary, and you really, really see the difference. So
it's very fulfilling, and I must say, with the newer technologies, which keep evolving, it's what's great is to be able to do something now that we could never do before. So that's one reason why we restore films more than once.
now, before we switch over to Alexander, Jane raised this question of how we're going to actually preserve digital files for the long term. And I, perhaps rashly said, Grover, that if anyone in the room has the answer to that, it might be you.
I don't know if I have the answer, but what I should say is that many films are created digitally and exhibited digitally, and they never touch film. The film is not involved at all. On the other hand, we still make motion pictures that are captured on film. I'm making one right now. So we take a fairly traditional and conservative approach to what I would call, standard conservation practices. So with our film, for example, we always make photochemical copies. We always make multiple versions of copies. We store them in different places around the world for risk management purposes, and we take the same approach with our digital data, because a film that is captured and created digitally, that digital data really is like the camera negative. So that is the object to preserve. So we take that same approach where we make sure that we have all the correct data, we duplicate it, we check it, we store it separately, we migrate it, we revisit it every couple of years to make sure it's still there, and at least at our studio still, we also make what we call black and white separation masters on our films. So, this is something that's been going on for almost 20 years now, so it's not a really new thing. Audio has been digital for 3 decades, so I don't want to say that things have been solved, everything is solved, but I think what you have to be is careful and concerned and make sure that you're doing the proper thing.
But for people in this audience who don't understand what you mean by a photochemical preservation, what you're saying, what you're telling us and the audience is that even if a film has been recorded digitally, you are making a film print or new.
Well, it's not a print, but it is a protection element that's just a little extra thing to have. The data is still the primary thing to preserve.
But you're using celluloid.
Yes.
Exactly. I don't think everyone understands that. That film is still the best preservation medium we have. Isn't that what you're saying?
I don't disagree with that for film. The main point I just want to make is that for films that are digital, the digital is the primary preservation element, and everyone in my business knows that, and we're working on that.
Well, hopefully we'll come back to this before the end of the conversation because it's not simple, and all of this is very costly, especially for us independent filmmakers. Anyway, thank you. And Grover's going to show us another clip a little later in the panel as well, so we'll come back to that one. I'm going to ask Alexander to go next. In getting to know Alexander, I've discovered that you style yourself as a Bologna nerd, and I would like you to explain to people what that means.
Well, next to Thierry's festival in Lyon, there's another small festival in Bologna, Italy. It's their 31 years strong, and it is the mecca of old film. So for you old film nerds out there, treat yourself and someday go to Bologna. It always straddles the 1st of July. It's the last few days of June, the first few days of July. And it's old movies, restorations, and pasta. And just outstanding for this.
So what are some of the films that you've discovered or rediscovered there that have inspired you?
A lot. I don't want to dwell on that, but you find many extraordinarily intelligently programmed series and very arcane things. However, one of the things I like to do is to see new restorations of classic films, particularly classic ones which I may not have seen. So it's nice to fill in my gaps in the best possible way.
And you've become a major supporter of film preservation and restoration.
In
your role now.
Let's not overstate it.
As a board member of the Film Foundation.
I am on the board of the Film Foundation, but if I can serve any purpose today among these heavy hitters, it's to allow me to invite you to see me as a representative of you who maybe doesn't do a lot for film preservation and restoration, but does a little. And if we all did a little, it can happen. And like all of you, I've been a film buff and a film enthusiast all of my life since I was in single digits. Crazy about watching old films. The whole reason I became a film director is I had to see if my love of watching films would translate into enjoying making them, and of course, trying to discern whether I had any talent at it. And I've been fortunate in that regard. But then that early love of film kind of circled back around, not because I was searching for it, but like you, I show up at events and I see old movies, and when I go to Cannes, I'm stuck in the Salle Buñuel watching old films, and I go to Bologna, and people started noticing about me because they're actually, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but there aren't a lot of contemporary directors who go out to see films and are, you know, who are film buffs in that way. Many are, but a surprising number are not. So they kind of noticed that about me, and so I happily allowed myself to be shanghaied into becoming a board member of the Film Foundation, Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation. I'll give you some brief details about that in a moment. And then, I'm on one of Gianluca's creative advisory boards at Bologna, and I'm on the board of Telluride because that's another film mecca. And really, it's just because, like anything in life, I just show up. You know, I go there, and I give a little money. I did finance the restoration of one Chaplin mutual short. I'm proud to have done that. I could be doing more. I hope to do more. But as I say, if we all just do a little bit, if everyone here gives $50 to film to UCLA or to anywhere, we'll get somewhere.
I want to give a shout out to Margaret Bodie and Jennifer Ahn from the Film Foundation, who are here in the audience. They have provided so much support for the restoration of so many films in partnership with the HSPA. Margaret runs the New York office, Jennifer runs the LA office. And I think you're going to tell a little bit more about what the foundation does.
Yeah, the Film Foundation has been mentioned a lot this evening, and let me just give you a very brief rundown of some of the things we do. For 29 years, the Film Foundation has identified, funded, and overseen the preservation and restoration of 825 films. Other programs include the World Cinema Project. 38 films have been restored to date, representing a rich diversity of global cinema. Second, the African Film Heritage Project, established just a couple of years ago in 2017 to locate, restore, and disseminate African cinema. 4 films have been restored to date. Educationally, the story of movies. The Film Foundation's educational curriculum teaches young people, over 10 million to date, about film language and history. And each year there are more than 500 screenings of films restored with support from the Film Foundation at festivals, museums, archives, universities, and repertory theaters. Now, I hope another thing we can all take away today is an expanded view of what the Hollywood Foreign Press Association does. We all think, the Golden Globes, but 20 years ago,
it's fabulous.
It's fantastic, but they are not just about that glitzy event. That glitzy event is a cash cow for them, so they can put money into film restoration and preservation, and many film programs. They're extraordinarily generous benefactor of many, many things. Partner since 1996, the HSPA has contributed, as Meher told us, $5.7 million to support film preservation through the Film Foundation. And of course, she mentioned the nitrate program. And now I'll bring it back to something, I'll close on this, something anecdotal, which is whenever I see people from the HSPA, the first thing I do is thank them for their dedication to film preservation and restoration. And about a year and a half ago, I was at some Hollywood party and ran into Meher. And I gave my thanks again. And she said, spur of the moment, she said, well, why don't you choose a film you would like to see restored? And I said, good, I'll ask my friends at the Film Foundation. She said, no, you choose a film you would like to have restored, preserved and restored. So I said, thanks, give me a minute. So I took about 4 or 5 months, and I asked my film nerd friends, this is a golden wish, and I wanted to be responsible. So here's what I finally came up with. Now we go back in time. As a kid growing up in Omaha, I was crazy about silent film, and hard to see in the 70s. So I had to start buying them and collecting silent films, and I could do so. I could buy not even Super 8, but regular 8 prints from a company called Black Hawk Films in Davenport, Iowa. Maybe some of you old farts like me remember that. Well, So by age 14, I had all 12 Chaplin Mutual shorts. I had, the Phantom of the Opera. I had Keaton. We didn't have that much Keaton, but I got some. And so forth and so on. Pretty big, little collection for a teenager, little young teenager. 10 years later, I'm at UCLA Film School, and who is my professor of silent film but David Shepard, who had curated that collection of films at Blackhawk. So, we became friends. It was the only semester he ever taught at UCLA, and I happened to take it that semester. I felt it was kismet. We remained friends until his death year before last. For those of you who may not know the name David Shepard, you of course know the name Kevin Brownlow. David Shepard is was like a lesser known, but equally important.
He was the American Kevin
The American
Brownlow.
Kevin Brownlow, let's say that. So, my last phone conversation with David before he died, about a week before he died, I forget what I asked him, but something like, how do you say this to a man who's going to pass away? Any parting words, anything you'd like to leave me with? Like, tell me. And he said, always do everything you can to preserve silent film and promote silent film. And we hung up. He passed away a week later. So I called Serge Bromberg, who was David's partner in Lobster Films, and I told him what the HSPA had offered me. He said, "Oh, you should do The Black Pirate." And The Black Pirate was a film that I remember when I was a teenager being trumpeted across the front page of the Blackhawk News Bulletin. Oh, you can buy The Black Pirate in Super 8 and 16 millimeter. And I said, great idea. So I finally contacted Maher and said, let's do The Black Pirate. And that's now the big restoration for this year. And it's not only is it one of, as you know, one of Douglas Fairbanks' splashiest films, but it was in a rare two-strip Technicolor process. Is that right, Grover? Two-color. And they're now gathering the elements. And apparently it's been a difficult restoration over the years, so I was happy to help marshal the forces financially of the HSPA, and I think MoMA's involved, and I forget who else is getting involved. So that's it. Do what you can.
Well, that's great. However, we can't close without revealing that you may have lost the negative for your first film.
All right, so we were very quickly indulged.
Did you find it?
I have. Look, stop torturing me. We were on the Horn a couple of days ago having like a getting to know you conversation for this very panel. And she said, are your films preserved somewhere or accounted for? And I said, I kind of don't know where the elements are. I assume that. I said, but funny you mention it, because I get 2 prints of each of my pictures. It's in my contract. I keep one and I donate the other one to an archive. And 3 or 4 years ago, I was invited to show my very first feature, Citizen Ruth, in Munich at the Munich Film Festival. They had given me a prize for it 20 years ago. And they said, well, we can't find a print. And we don't want to screen a Blu-ray, and I don't even think it's out on Blu-ray. Can you give us one of your prints? I said, sure, for you, anything. So I shipped one of my prints over, and I get a call back a week later. Well, the projectionist ran it. There's something screwy with the sound. I said, well, that's funny. Well, I happen to have a second print. Let me send that. I sent the second print, same response. We can't show it. Something screwy with the sound. Now, this is right before Bologna, so 5 days later I went from Munich to Bologna, and I asked these guys, I either asked you or Sean, I posed that problem, and you said, when was the film? I said, 1996. Oh yeah. Something with the optical negative preserved on, what is it, Grover?
It had to do with print stock.
Print stock.
Print stock.
Cheap-ass Mylar print stock.
Now, that I don't know. It's a problem with prints made in that era.
So...
It happens.
I do need to track down the elements. Of course, that was Miramax, which became Disney. I don't know where the heck it is, but I'm on the case, and yeah.
It's on the list.
It's on the list.
So, just to prove every filmmaker, even extremely well-known and successful filmmakers, in my experience, have lost track of their negatives. So I'm putting you all on alert, those of you who are filmmakers. Start looking for your master film elements and sound elements before it's too late. A case in point. Thank you, Alexander.
A good example of a bad example.
Well, we'll have a detective help both Jane find FTA and you find Citizen Ruth. And now I'd like to you've heard him beautifully introduced by Meher, but invite Chris Horak to start off our panel discussion. I'm happy that Chris and I have known each other ever since I started on the restoration of my father's film about the Nuremberg trial. Among many other talents and skills, Chris is a very well-known expert on the cinema of the Third Reich, and I benefit enormously from your counsel, Chris, for which I remain very grateful. We are also partnered, as Meher mentioned, on the Pioneers of Queer Cinema tour that we'll be launching next year, and on the restoration of a number of important LGBTQIA+ films, and on the Queer Cinema Index. So I've gotten to know Chris and the archive very well, and I understand the challenges that you're facing, and I would love you to talk a little bit about those challenges.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the HSPA and the Film Foundation. You know, the work at UCLA in film restoration could not be done with organizations like the Film Foundation, the George Lucas Family Foundation, again, Hollywood Foreign Press Association, as well as other organizations like the National Film Preservation Foundation and the Louis B. Mayer Foundation. The fact is that UCLA is a state university, but that only 15% of our budget actually comes from the state. 45% of our salaries and every penny of programmatic activity, whether film preservation, programming, access, needs to be funded through third-party sources. Every single piece of film we preserve must be financed through grants and gifts. That's why we're so grateful to be a part of this event. UCLA Film and Television Archive stands among the world's great institutions for the conservation, exhibition, and interpretation of moving images. We are now the second largest moving image archive in the United States and the 6th largest in the world. Its collections, which were begun 53 years ago, include over 500,000 titles from all of the major studios. We hold all the nitrate legacy films of Paramount, 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, and as well as large collections from New World Pictures, Orion, RKO, Republic. We also, since 1981, have been the caretakers of the Hearst Metrotome Newsfilm Collection. The Hearst Metrotome Newsfilm Collection, of course, that was the official newsreel of MGM beginning in 1924. It had started in 1916, and that is 27 million feet of footage. And, you know, watching these Lumière films, I've seen them so many times, and yet I'm fascinated to think that here you have this window into a world that is 125 years old, and especially if you had a really good quality images, you can feel the texture, you can see the faces, and it's still magic for me. And I've been doing this now for 40 plus years, and I still find it magic. So newsreels, the same thing. They give us a memory of what the world was like. The archive at UCLA, we now have a new facility out in Santa Clarita, is also unique in that we are one of the few large archives that is embedded in a world-class research university. And so we work very closely with academics, and so our goal is not only restoration and preservation, but really to move the field forward in terms of doing research and doing the kind of programming that people don't see. We have our Billy Wilder Theater where we do regular programming all year round. And in fact, I'm sorry I'm going to have to leave a little early because I have another event. We're doing a big series on Fay Ray and Robert Riskin, and Victoria Riskin is there tonight. We're doing a little reception. As I noted, there are huge budgetary constraints to our festival, and yet, again, it is the work of individuals who donate to our campaigns as well as institutions. We recently had our Festival of Preservation in February, where we show all of our new restored work, both analog and digital. And so, for example, the Film Foundation, in conjunction with the George Lucas Family Foundation, financed A Voice in the Wind, The Crooked Way, a wonderful early Mexican horror film called El Fantasma del Convento, Enamorada, which was maybe one of the greatest Mexican films of all time, another film noir, Alibi, and The Red House. We also showed funded by the National Film Preservation Board, Savages, which is a short African-American film, as well as a Boy and His Dog, a wonderful film from the 70s. Apart from the organizations mentioned above, we also work very closely with the Sundance Film Festival, with whom we preserve titles like Hours in the Times, and with Outfest, with whom we formed a partnership 20 plus years ago to start the UCLA Outfest Legacy Project, which now to collect LGBTQ titles, and that collection now numbers 36,000 titles and is the largest LGBTQ collection in the world. And we, again, at the festival showed Gays USA, a very early 70s film of the gay liberation movement.
Chris, I think you're going to show a clip of one of the films you have restored, are you not?
Yes, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So, have I run out of time?
No, you haven't run out of time, but we did start quite a bit later than we expected.
Yes, no, I know.
And I know you have to leave in a few minutes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. A lot of our work is still analog because we believe that film masters are important, and we also believe in showing film as film, but of course more and more we're also doing digital work. So one of the titles we just restored is a film called The Killing Floor, which you were probably involved with back in the American Playhouse, right, in the 1980s.
Yeah, by Bill Duke.
We're also presently have a crowdsourcing campaign to fund the 5 student films made at UCLA by the Doors founders Ray Manzarek and Jim Morrison. And if you'd like to make a donation, we'll take any amount. Go to spark.ucla.edu, and those films, along with a large student film program, including the films of hopefully of Alexander Payne, will be shown in the fall when we do a big student film festival. So finally, I'd like to end with the fact that, of course, our main goal is to preserve American films, but we are a large archive and we're a first world archive, so we take seriously our role to also help other countries and filmmakers in other places where there is no preservation infrastructure. So a few years ago, we funded the first, or restored the first Ceylonese feature film ever made, Gamparilla, from 1963. We're presently working on an early and very award-winning Peruvian film called Cholo from 1972 by Bernardo Batievsky. And just in the last year, we were contacted by a Nepalese filmmaker, Yadev Karl, who made the first Nepalese feature film called Prim Pindat in 1995, and we're going to show just a little clip of that, which is a restoration project. There are no subtitles or anything like that. But again, we want to help everyone.
Can you talk over it a bit to tell the audience a little bit about what you did? While we're ready to have the lights down. Thank you.
So anyway, I got an email from the son of Yadev Karl, and he said, well, you know, there's just no possibility in Nepal to preserve material, and they had filmed this film in 35 millimeter, and so they asked us if we could help. So we had all of the original negatives sent to UCLA from Nepal, and we've digitized the material. We've also been working with the filmmaker, and that's one of the great things about digital, is that you can make files and then you can send them back to Nepal. And so the son, who is himself a filmmaker, with the father, who's now in his late 70s, are looking at it and we're doing color correction. And the son has also done a translation, because this film is from a very famous Nepalese novel, and is revered in Nepal for that reason. So hopefully by next year we will have this film finished, and we'll premiere it hopefully, maybe at Cannes. What do you think?
Well, Chris, thank you very, very much. We don't mean to kick you off the stage. We know that Victoria Riskin is waiting for you. So thank you very, very much for joining us. Will you give Chris a big hand?
Thank you very much.
The only thing I can add is that if when I showed the film to Martin Scorsese in Paris when he was preparing Hugo Cabret, and by the way, Hugo Cabret is Georges Méliès, who arrived just after that. We were talking about that film in Vietnam, and Marty said, well, it remains another film with another little girl in Vietnam running in front of a camera. And that film was shot in '65 during the Vietnam War. And what we feel with the Lumière films, and also with the photos they did, is that it's the idea that the world at that time thought that the future was going to be beautiful. And it was not beautiful, because World War I, World War II, and in between these two films, the film shot by Lumière in French and the China in Vietnam, and the film we know during the Vietnam, we have the 20th century, and Lumière, in a way, the Lumière films, out of its own cinema quality, is also a wonderful testimony. That's why we had to restore that, and we had to show this film, because it's not about cinema memory, it's really about the world, the memory of the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We also clarified that we can play a tiny part in helping restore these films. Will you come back next year and present the second phase?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. How long will it take to finish?
Well, we started to restore this film in chemical restoration for the centennial of the Cinémathèque in 1995, and we did it again then in 2K, and this is now the restoration in 4K. As Lumière was a super technician, he deserved to have his film restored in the best way we can. And we restored a first group of 200 films, and we are restoring now another group of 300 films, but of course we have to go to 1,500 more films, because we have the official Lumière film and the out-of-list Lumière film, which are also very important piece of history.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You've already heard from the remarkable Thierry Frémaux. I had the pleasure of working with Thierry on a movie called Shadow Magic about the making of the very first movie in China. And he gave us access to some of those marvelous Lumière films that you showed earlier this evening. But Thierry has more to say. He always has more projects that he's working on. And so I'm going to give the mic back to you, Thierry, to tell us a little bit about your restoration of the Charles Vanel film.
Yes. Yeah, before going to a clip which is a silent film, which we are restoring and with the help of the Hollywood Foreign Press, would like to say that that this panel is very important because we always have to restart the movement about heritage, about legacy. We always to have first because we have to teach new generation, and we always have to think that it's never finished. And when Anthony slide, and I like to hear that name, Anthony was a great historian of cinema. Nitrate can't wait, but it's cinema can't wait. And we could say the same with literature and so on, but as cinema is a technical art, we really have to pay attention to that. And the UCLA is restoring that Nepalese film. But for sure, all over the world, in this moment, there is a great movement of people, of government sometimes, which understood that the memory of their country is inside the artists who make films. And that's why I had two reasons why I created Cannes Classics. First, it was to pay a tribute. In Cannes, we have, of course, the Cannes Film Festival with the contemporary cinema. And we have directors, we have producers, we have all what is making the cinema today. But Cannes Classics is also to pay a tribute to people like Rover, all the people who are involved, and all over the world, there are thousands working and who deserve to be exposed and to be known and to be helped and to be, and by the way, I'm sure that Alexander is like Quentin Tarantino. When we don't know where they are there watching classic film, and Quentin Tarantino is always the kind of filmmaker. When he has his own film in competition, he pays attention 2 days about his film, and then before and after, he goes and watch the restored print of films, and especially him on print. So we have to pay a tribute. What the HSPA is doing is not only about American cinema, is about European cinema and much more. What the Film Foundation, Margaret and Martin Scorsese are doing is also about the World Cinema Project, for example, is really helping countries to get part of their own memory, which was lost. And it's very important. The second reason is more in these past years is that we are very happy to see countries, Bulgaria, Philippines, and so on, starting to have a real program of restoration. And it's very funny for some countries because there is no politics anymore. It's really about heritage, really about these objects of which are part of not only history of their own country, but about the world. The second thing I would like to say is that we are here in this wonderful theater, and as I said, Lumière invented 3 times cinema. He invented the technique, the art, and the audience, and watching films in screen rooms. So cinemas are also in danger. Movie theater are in danger. Not in France, not, I think here. I think in New York there was a lot of new theater, but in Italy, now you go to the street of Roma, there is no cinema anymore. And Nanni Moretti is fighting for the Novo Sacer to preserve that idea to be together to watch films. And even for the architecture, and this is a wonderful example, like we have the Grand Rex in Paris. I think we have also to start a new reflection about preserving the idea. So it's an immaterial legacy. The UNESCO loves to celebrate the immaterial goodies of the humanity. So I think we have to think about that. And again, pointing what he's doing with the New Beverly, sometimes it's very difficult because when, for example, we celebrated 20 years of Pulp Fiction weekend. So I call him and saying, well, what about that idea? He said, oh, well, can you be there? Oh, yes, of course, I'll be there. Yeah, because there is a restored print. Yes, I know. So no, I'll be there. We do it on the beach in Cannes. Yes, wonderful. And John will be there and say, okay, Quentin, say, bye-bye. Then he runs again, say, of course, on print, not on digital. So they had to make a print and so on. It was great. And then I think he kept the print, which is good because we know where the print are at Quentin's house.
Well, unfortunately, we're not going to get to see this clip on a print.
Yeah, no, but what he's doing at the New Beverly is very interesting because for the new generation, they don't know our eyes are not the same anymore. Our ears are not the same anymore. And sometimes when you have new generation, a young spectator, he watch a 35mm print, he thinks there is a problem of focus. There's a problem of screening, of projection. And of course not. But it's also something we have to pay attention. And third, we also did that festival in Lyon because of course from where part of the history of cinema started, it was important to have the history of cinema to be back and to have the artists to be back. That's why it's also about celebration. That's why Jane has been so generous for us, but also so fantastic in saying things that it's also an immaterial thing to have 5,000 people hearing an artist talking. That will be also very. That is part of history of cinema, and in this festival, it's also there is a classic film market, which is the only one in the world, because it's also about selling, buying films, having distribution, having television, and you're right, you mentioned the role. Of course, he had this problem with Asphalt Jungle and all these films. Your favorite ex-husband, but he did a wonderful job in the mainstream audience with TCM and not only. So I think that we have to be together with some of the specialists, but we also have to go to theater. And tomorrow you can hear and go to a bookstore and buy the next book, very famous, but also buying a Jack London or a Hemingway novel. So for the films, it's the same. You can go in theater to watch contemporary cinema, but also paying a ticket to watch what they call an old film. And non-film will be older than Van Gogh painting or than a Shakespeare play. So we don't say the old Shakespeare or old play for Shakespeare. So, but that is changing, and that is a great thing.
We're talking about reactivating. That's why we use the word reactivate. You don't want to think it's something old. You want to think it's something that is made available again in a new format that was eternal. So let's watch an eternal film. Let's watch a little bit of Dans la nuit.
Yeah, so Dans la nuit has a very specific story. It's the only film directed by the actor Charles Vanel, the actor of Wage of Fear, and he did that when he was young. Well, the image, he always looked old, but he made that film in the late 20s, so late that it was in 1929, and he made a film as a silent film. When the film came out, the silent era was over. So the film disappeared, and it was a book failure. And then the film disappeared, and nobody even knew he made a movie. And when he was about to die, as the film was shot near Lyon, and as we had a poor print of that, we screened the movie, and he said, okay, I give you my film. So we made a lot of researchers to go and to get the negative and to go straight to a new material. And it's not a big challenge, it's just that nobody did it. The French Cinematheque had a print, which was good for us, and what I prepare is a comparison, like Grover did, between how we used to see the film, and we were happy to see the film like that. And how, because we are restoring it, because of, with the help of the HSPA, and it's just the first result, and we will have two more steps to get the final result.
So
but
this
the
is
first result of the restoration.
In progress, and you're
It's
going
in
to talk
progress,
over it. Is that
but
right?
you will look how even in progress, it's enough to go straight to that and look at the result. I even see myself.
Bob, we're going to be ready to show the clip of Dans la nuit.
So it's in black and white, and I think we have some music with.
I'm announcing now an executive decision that I've just decided to take. We had planned to have a Q&A with all of you, but the HFPA has put on a really lavish reception to follow, and so I want to make sure that there's time to enjoy their food and drink and for all of you to talk with each other. So we're going to wind up with the last clip from...
I have something to say. I forgot. I also would like to say here today that we also need to restore Coming Home, the film Jane produced, because there is not a good print of Coming Home, and HSPA became quite unknown, and I think I would like to make a call to have help to restore Coming Home, which is a masterpiece. And it's the opportunity to have.
What does it cost to restore a film? I have no idea. Except that I know it's expensive.
Yeah.
But like a film like Coming Home, what would it cost?
Now you're putting him on the spot. Good for
I
you,
can't say
Shane.
because I'm not familiar with it, but it varies, from a few thousand to a couple of 100,000. It depends on really the condition of the material, and that's always what the challenge is.
We have tried at IndieCollect to bring the cost down to about $250 a minute, but it can, as Grover says, it depends a great deal on the original materials and how elaborate it gets, and some of these restorations have cost $1 million or more dollars, so it can be a big number. Grover, I would love to give you an opportunity to show the last clip that you've prepared.
I know we're running late. If you want to skip it, that's okay.
Well, no, I think it's great fun to finish off with the last clip from you, and then we'll adjourn.
We'll do this quick. Okay, so I need to set it up. So this next demonstration is we've talked about what you do with films when they're damaged or deteriorated. So what do you do if you don't have the film? And in this case, this example is a film made in the 40s. It was a Fred Astaire, Rita Hayworth musical called You Were Never Lovelier. And there is a shot in the film where Fred Astaire with a companion just walks through a doorway. And then it cuts. It's the entire shot. He just walks through a doorway. In the middle of this shot, there were 7 frames missing. So it's not a lot of time. So that's 7/24ths of a second. And so what you have is, since the frames are missing, you have black frames. And the reason that you have those instead of just pulling it together so there's a little jump cut is because you want to make sure you preserve the full soundtrack, because that would have to be cut. So in the olden days, so to speak, this is what would happen: is if you damaged film and you cut it out and you couldn't replace it, they would just slug it with blank frames, and in order to maintain sync with the soundtrack. Nowadays, with our current technologies, and with people who are in this business who are passionate about film restoration and have the technical know-how to kind of help us get things done that we can't get done, we can digitally replace these frames, and it's a kind of a motion interpolation of what's happening before the slug and what's happening after the slug, and kind of determining what that motion would be. There are a lot of algorithms that are created for this, but that's basically it. Plus, a graphic artist then has to go in and do further manipulation frame to frame. This work is all done by a gentleman named Seth Berkowitz at Scenaric Lab in New York. It's fabulous. So if you'll run this Fred Astaire clip, and the first thing you'll see is the damage right there. And then you'll see the repair. And you'll see it side by side with the damage on the left and the restored frames on the right. And what is great about this, it's one of the best examples I've ever seen, is you cannot tell there's a problem with the restored version. This is a different shot in the same film, Adolphe Menjou composing a letter. It's got 2 sections that are missing frames. So we happen to have, however, another element made from the negative before those frames were lost that had those frames. That's this element right here. And you'll see in the middle of this, though, this element has its own damage. So we tried to digitally fix this, but there was a problem. And so here is the first digital fix on that secondary element. And you'll see right there, that little glitch, right when he's blinking his eyes, we couldn't fix it. So what we did was, and here's the final restored version, we went back to the original negative with the slugs. We did the motion compensation, and right there where he is blinking, you didn't notice anything. And the reason for that is that Seth borrowed the eyes from another frame in this same shot and digitally replaced them. Just again, things that 20 years ago, that second version with the damage in it is actually what we would have done for the restoration, because it had the missing frames even though it was damaged. Now we don't have to make that compromise, which is a terrific development.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So you've been given really a tour of the world that we are inhabiting, seeing some of the remarkable things that can be done. But I think the movie that follows, for those of you who are staying, is the perfect title for the theme of this evening, which is that there's incredible work possible. There are innumerable movies that need to be saved, and we've just added Coming Home to the list. But what we need is a fistful of dollars. So thank Thank you all. I think the hair is going to come out. First of all, let's thank the panel. And I think we're going to have a few closing remarks from Meher Tatna. Meher, can we just stay on stage with you here?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you again, all of you. Maybe we'll do this again next year and you'll all come back. Maybe for the Black Pirate that you will present, Alexander, for us. Maybe for one more. Thank you all for coming out to support the HFPA's Restoration Summit. While this is the first time that we are doing an event of this kind, the HFPA has been a decades-long supporter of film restoration. Since 1996, we have donated $6.5 million towards 125 film restoration projects that have been viewed by hundreds of thousands of filmgoers worldwide. Why do we support film restoration? The Library of Congress says that only 20% of feature films made in the 10s and 20s have survived today. And of those made before 1950, a good half of them have been lost. So it is imperative as film lovers and journalists for us to help preserve our cinematic heritage, which documents the way we lived, shows us the way we felt, captures the dreams that we dreamed, and helps us understand the experiences of times different from us, so future filmmakers can be inspired to add to that heritage. Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation has been our primary partner in this effort, and through them, we have funded the preservation of 91 films. For instance, 1930's Abraham Lincoln by D.W. Griffith, Alfred Hitchcock's 1939 Blackmail, Cecil B. DeMille's 1915 The Cheat, Ida Lupino's The Bigamist from 1953, and Satyajit Ray's Apu trilogy from the late 50s. Tonight's A Fistful of Dollars is another we've helped restore in partnership with the Film Foundation. 17 titles were completed at UCLA, 5 at the Cineteca de Bologna. The HFPA also partnered with the Film Foundation for the nitrate retrofit of the projection booth at American Cinematheque's Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. Less than a handful of theaters in the US have the ability to screen nitrate film on a regular basis. Since the retrofit and the debut screening of the nitrate print of Casablanca, the annual TCM Classic Film Festival and Cinecon Classic Film Festival have consistently included nitrate films in their programs at the Egyptian. Since 2013, the HFPA awarded $200,000 to the Film Noir Foundation for five 35mm restorations of classic noirs. And since 2005, another $365,000 to the Outfest UCLA Legacy Project for 26 films preserving LGBT moving images. Since last year, the HFPA started a partnership with IndieCollect, whose mission is to rescue, restore, and reactivate American indie films, to restore 3 films for the Pioneers of Queer Cinema Tour, being organized in collaboration with UCLA Film and Television Archive and Outfest. Which brings us to the raison d'etre for tonight. Last October, we announced a partnership with the Institut Lumière at the Festival Lumière in Lyon, one of the premier venues for restored and classic films, where we granted 180,000 euros to support the restoration of the second phase of the Lumière brothers' 1-minute short films. I would like to quickly acknowledge my colleagues who worked so hard to put this evening together. Thank Paola Bujaldi, Luca Celada, Ramzan Maluki, Ruben Nepales, Frank Rousseau, Francis Schulberg, Lorenzo Soria, Magnus Sundholm, Greg Gettner, Carrie Donardo, David Castro, Jason Little. Thanks to our tech whizzes, Michael Carter and Matt Smith. Thank you to our publicists, Samuel Liu and Carrie Bernstein. Thank you, Jennifer Ahn from the Film Foundation, Maëlle Arnaud from the Institut Lumière, and thank you to Sandra Cuneo, our grants officer, without whom we would never do all this stuff. And thank you to the ACE for hosting us, and thank you all for turning out. We do this so that we can show you what we do. We are enthusiastic about what we do, but the fact that you all turn out and support our efforts means the world. The fact that you love classic movies means that we give money, because that makes it worth it, that you all turn out and love film. Anyway, please join us in the lobby for our reception, and then come back here at 8 o'clock for a fistful of dollars, which Thierry will introduce. Thank you.